An 8% raise, just 8%. Nicole Walsh's laughter bounced off the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of her corner office like polished brass bullets ricocheting in every direction. At your age, Dean, we need hungry young talent who live and breathe modern frameworks, not expensive legacy employees clinging to outdated architectural approaches. She could not finish her sentence without another wave of patronizing laughter shaking her shoulders, her Harvard Business School diploma gleaming on the walnut paneled wall behind her like a shiny trophy of unearned corporate superiority. I stood there frozen in that sterile executive space, clutching my leather portfolio containing 16 years' worth of technical achievements, watching this 37-year-old chief executive officer with her impeccably styled hair dismiss everything I had built for Tech Vault Solutions. The binder in my hands held detailed documentation of every major enterprise cloud migration, every core data architecture, and every midnight emergency patch I had executed while she collected annual performance bonuses large enough to buy beachfront property in California. My name is Dean Barrett. I am 48 years old, director of cloud engineering at TechVault, and until that blistering Tuesday morning, I was the quintessential corporate loyalist who genuinely believed that silent dedication and relentless hard work would eventually be recognized. I was the guy who stayed at one organization for 16 years, while watching 28-year-old developers with a fraction of my practical experience and twice my enthusiasm for corporate buzzwords get promoted over me, simply because they presented flashier pitch decks. My wife Laura calls me overly patient. My children used to joke that I belonged to a bygone era because I preferred meticulous documentation and structured system design over hasty deployments. But what Nicole did not comprehend, what none of the executive committee members understood, was that my so-called outdated approach was the exact reason TechVault's cloud infrastructure had maintained 99.99% uptime for over a decade. While she was getting her graduate degree and learning about market disruption, I was standing in freezing server environments at 3 in the morning, making sure our enterprise clients did not suffer catastrophic downtime. The cloud optimization architecture I designed saved this organization $2,300,000 annually, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. The proprietary security framework I engineered prevented 3 major enterprise breach attempts last year alone, including the sophisticated ransomware threat that would have crippled our primary operations and exposed us to massive legal liability. Nicole waved her manicured hand dismissively, still chuckling softly as she leaned back in her ergonomic executive chair that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her corner suite was a study in aggressive modern minimalism, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the harbor, sleek metallic furniture, and abstract art pieces designed specifically to remind visitors of corporate hierarchy. "Everyone is completely replaceable, Dean," she said, her voice dropping into that rehearsed executive tone she used during quarterly investor calls. "Even senior engineers with decades of tenure. If you believe your skill set is worth more than what our current pay band provides, you are free to test your luck elsewhere in the market." She stared at me with a practiced corporate smile that never reached her eyes. "Maybe it is time for you to think seriously about early retirement. The local golf courses are quite lovely this time of year." Something fundamental cracked inside me at that exact moment. Not my spirit, but the deep-seated belief that corporate loyalty was a two-way contract. The foundation of 16 years of believing that technical competence mattered more than executive politics crumbled into dust. I had helped grow TechVault from a struggling 50-person startup into a 2,000-employee enterprise, sacrificing my personal time and family milestones to ensure the company succeeded. "I understand, Nicole," I said quietly, gathering my documents into my portfolio. Through the glass partition, I could see my junior colleagues pretending to inspect their monitors while desperately straining to catch every detail of my humiliation. "Listen, Dean," Nicole added, her tone shifting to an artificial display of managerial empathy. "You are competent at what you do, but you are expensive. The board sees a senior director pulling $140,000 annually when we can hire two eager computer science graduates for that exact same compensation. They bring fresh energy. They do not challenge executive decisions. That is just rational business math. Nothing personal, nothing personal. As if 16 years of working 60-hour weeks was merely a numbers exercise. As if missing my daughter Maya's violin recitals and my son Mason's high school baseball tournaments to recover crashed databases was nothing personal. As if watching my wife battle health challenges while worrying about medical coverage was just another item on a spreadsheet. That was the precise moment I realized what I had to do. The clarity hit me like freezing water, washing away 16 years of corporate compliance. If I was nothing more than an easily replaceable line item on her quarterly budget, then it was time to see how her prized technology machine functioned without the engineer who built its heart. I walked back through the open-plan floor to my workspace. Despite my director title and 16 years of senior service, I sat in an oversized cubicle in the middle of the floor because executive management believed open offices fostered collaboration. My desk was positioned between two recent hires who referred to me as the legacy guy and frequently asked me to debug their code because they lacked fundamental knowledge of underlying database architecture. The morning light streamed through the high windows, illuminating rows of standing desks where young developers typed furiously on high-end laptops, building new applications on top of core systems I had architected long before they entered college. On my desk sat a framed photograph of my family from last autumn. Laura looked tired but happy after completing her second round of complex medical treatments. Maya, my 20-year-old daughter, was pursuing her degree at the state university, where tuition fees had just jumped 12%. Mason, my 18-year-old son, was preparing for college applications while worrying about student loan burdens. Our family medical expenses had reached $47,000 out of pocket over the preceding 12 months, money we had been forced to draw from our home equity line of credit. Health insurance premiums absorbed nearly 30% of my take-home pay. Maya's educational fees were eroding our modest emergency savings, and Mason was looking at engineering programs costing $65,000 annually. Yet here I was, being mocked by a 37-year-old executive for requesting a modest 8% salary adjustment after 16 years of flawless service. Meanwhile, the monthly corporate bulletin had just published a glowing profile on Nicole, celebrating her purchase of a third luxury vacation property in Whistler, alongside her primary residence in the city. The article featured a photograph of her holding an Industry Innovation Award for the security framework I had single-handedly built. I reached into my lower desk drawer and pulled out a worn leather-bound notebook. The leather cover was scuffed from years of travel. Inside were hundreds of pages of technical diagrams, mathematical formulas, and algorithmic logic I had recorded during evenings, lunch breaks, and weekend hours spent in my home workstation. This notebook contained my personal research. It held advanced predictive threat detection algorithms I had written on my personal computer setup, security protocols I had refined in my garage workstation during weekends, and neural network models trained using my private hardware. Years ago, when TechVault faced severe security vulnerabilities, I had integrated early versions of these algorithms into their infrastructure to protect the firm. I had done so out of sheer commitment, never realizing that corporate management would view my generosity as their permanent property. I flipped through the pages, stopping at entries dated April 2021 during the height of the remote work transition. At the top of the page, written in my handwriting, was the title, Proprietary Predictive Neural Framework for Real-Time Threat Analysis, engineered on personal workstation equipment. Below it were detailed version control records, cryptographic hash signatures, and timestamps linked directly to my private repository account. What Nicole and TechVault's legal department had completely overlooked, due to sheer negligence, was that I had never executed a formal intellectual property assignment agreement for these personal innovations. The standard employment contract I signed 16 years prior contained standard scope of employment clauses covering work performed during office hours using company resources. under state labor laws, specifically California Labor Code. Section 2870, inventions developed entirely on an employee's own time using personal equipment without company resources, remain non-assignable personal property. My private repository contained thousands of commits, every single one time-stamped, cryptographically verified, and fully documented long before TechVault ever deployed the logic. The threat detection system that saved TechVault millions of dollars in potential ransom payouts had originated as my weekend hobby project to protect personal network servers. The cloud distribution module that won Nicole her leadership award was built while I was experimenting at home with server cost reduction. I had shared these breakthroughs with TechVault out of professional pride, foolishly assuming that my loyalty would be returned with fair compensation and respect. Instead, Nicole had used my work to burnish her executive resume while treating me as an obsolete employee whose salary needed to be pruned. My monitor chimed with another broadcast email from corporate communications highlighting TechVault's state-of-the-art security suite winning market praise. The article quoted Nicole speaking eloquently about fostering breakthrough engineering without mentioning a single engineer who actually wrote the underlying codebase. I remembered my late father, who had worked 35 years at a manufacturing facility before the parent firm liquidated his division and eliminated his pension benefits. Loyalty is the foundation of character, he had always told me. Take care of your employer, and they will take care of your family. He had believed that right up until the afternoon they handed him a severance folder and escorted him from the property. My mother had experienced a similar fate after 40 years as a legal secretary, replaced by automated office software the moment she turned 60. I pulled up my phone contacts and scrolled to an entry I had saved 2 years prior. Scott Rodriguez, Vice President of Technology at TechFlow Solutions, TechVault's primary market competitor. Scott had reached out to me on professional networks after reading a white paper I published on distributed security systems. His messages had been persistent and deeply respectful. His last message, sent 4 months earlier, read, "Dean, I have been analyzing TechVault's operational resilience, and I know who is actually building their core architecture. The offer to join TechFlow remains open whenever you are ready for a leadership team that values deep experience over corporate optics. We believe gray hair signifies battle-tested wisdom, not obsolescence. At the time, my misdirected loyalty had kept me from responding. Now those words read like a lifeline. I touched the call button and placed the phone to my ear. Scott Rodriguez speaking. A clear, authoritative voice answered. "Scott, this is Dean Barrett from TechVault," I said. "I believe it is time we had that conversation you suggested." There was a brief silence on the line, followed by genuine warmth. "Dean, I was beginning to think you would never call. I have followed your career for half a decade. Are you ready to discuss an environment where technical expertise is actually honored?" I looked around the buzzing open office floor, at the glass executive suites, and toward Nicole's office where she was likely reviewing executive bonus structures. "I am ready," I said. "When can we meet? How about dinner tonight?" Scott replied instantly. "I know a quiet private room at Morton Steakhouse in Palo Alto." 7 o'clock. I will be there, I confirmed. At 7 o'clock that evening, I walked into Morton Steakhouse in Palo Alto. Scott Rodriguez was already waiting in a quiet booth near the back of the dining room. Scott was 51 years old with silvered hair at his temples and an alert, sharp posture. He wore a crisp, tailored blazer without a tie, projecting the quiet confidence of an engineer who had risen through technical ranks rather than corporate public relations. When we shook hands, his grip was firm and steady. "I have been watching TechVault's technical releases for years, Dean," Scott began, after the waiter took our beverage orders. "Or more accurately, I have been tracking the sudden architectural breakthroughs that repeatedly coincided with your project timelines. That predictive threat detection protocol you deployed for Vanguard Financial last year. My security research team spent 6 months trying to analyze your logic and could not replicate its efficiency. A quiet sense of professional validation washed over me. For the first time in years, someone in an executive role understood the sheer difficulty of what I had engineered." "How did you determine it was my work?" I asked. Scott smiled, taking a sip of his sparkling water. Because Nicole Walsh does not possess the technical depth to understand advanced neural logic, let alone design enterprise algorithms. I have watched her panel presentations. She is skilled at buzzwords, but entirely absent on technical substance. Systems of that caliber do not emerge from executive meetings. They are built by master architects with decades of hands-on experience. He leaned across the table, lowering his tone. Furthermore, everyone in our industry knows your reputation, Dean. Senior engineers across Silicon Valley respect your work, even if your own chief executive officer fails to recognize your value. I took a deep breath, placing my hands on the table. What specifically is TechFlow offering? Senior Director of Cloud Architecture, Scott stated without hesitation. You will oversee our entire enterprise security infrastructure, managing a dedicated division of 9 senior engineers. And when I say senior, I mean veterans. The average age on that team is 46. We operate under the firm conviction that deep experience produces superior, reliable code. He paused, allowing the gravity of his proposal to register. Compensation is $350,000 base salary, plus an executive equity package vesting over 4 years, full health benefits covering your entire family without out-of-pocket deductibles, and complete credit on all patents you author, $350,000. It was 2.5 times my current compensation at TechVault. It meant we could clear Laura's medical debts immediately, pay Maya's university fees in full, and cover Mason's engineering college tuition without taking on a single dollar of debt. It meant ending the constant financial anxiety that had weighed on my household for years. More importantly, Scott continued, reaching into his briefcase. If you choose to bring your proprietary personal innovations, theoretical models developed on your private time using your personal hardware, TechFlow has a formal intellectual property acquisition framework. We provide fair market valuation and structured royalty compensation for proven personal IP. Scott's eyes reflected sharp legal awareness. He understood the statutory boundaries governing personal intellectual property. TechFlow was not merely offering a job. They were offering to legally acquire and commercialize technology that TechVault had taken for granted without compensation. I placed my leather notebook on the polished table between us. I have documented version control logs, cryptographic signatures, and private repository records proving these algorithms were developed as personal projects prior to any implementation. TechVault deployed the logic, but they never executed an IP assignment contract or paid acquisition fees. Scott carefully flipped through the handwritten pages, examining the mathematical structures and time-stamped entries. This documentation is exceptionally thorough, he observed, his expression growing serious. What percentage of TechVault's active security engine relies on these personal algorithms? Approximately 60%, I replied calmly. The real-time threat response matrix, the cloud resource distribution logic, and the automated breach isolation protocols were all engineered on my home workstation, before TechVault ever touched them. Scott closed the notebook and met my gaze directly. That represents an astonishing oversight by TechVault's legal and executive leadership. Nicole Walsh views senior technical staff as expensive liabilities, I noted. She was far too focused on reducing payroll numbers to bother auditing intellectual property titles. Over the next 2 hours, Scott and I detailed the transition strategy. Every step would adhere strictly to legal guidelines. I would fulfill my notice period professionally, hand over standard company documentation, and retain full ownership of my personal intellectual property. 14 days later, I walked into Nicole's corner office and laid my formal resignation letter on her glass desk. Printed on company stationery, it adhered precisely to corporate notice protocols. Nicole barely glanced up from her laptop monitor, her attention divided between email threads and a muted video conference. 2 weeks' notice, she asked, scanning the document carelessly. Where are you moving? To TechFlow Solutions, I answered directly. That caught her complete attention. Her eyes snapped up from the screen, her composure instantly hardening into visible irritation. TechFlow is our primary market competitor. This is extremely inconvenient timing. We are in final negotiations to renew our flagship cloud security contract with Vanguard Financial. I am fully aware, I said calmly. I engineered the security architecture that secured the Vanguard account initially. Nicole's expression shifted from irritation to subtle concern. For the first time, she seemed to register the practical implications of my departure. We can discuss retention terms as immediately, she said quickly. I can authorize a 15% salary adjustment effective next pay cycle, along with a promotion to vice president title. The offer was far more than the 8% I had requested weeks earlier. Had she shown that respect initially, I might have stayed. But some corporate breaches cannot be repaired with tardy financial concessions. TechFlow's offer is $350,000 base salary plus executive equity, I stated quietly. And more importantly, they respect experience over youth bias. Nicole let out a harsh, artificial laugh, though her hands trembled slightly on her keyboard. They are overpaying by at least 100%. You will find out quickly that an older engineer cannot maintain their rapid execution pace. I smiled, feeling a calm confidence I had not experienced in decades. We shall see who is disappointed, Nicole. My final 2 weeks at TechVault were a study in corporate hypocrisy. Department managers who had ignored my department for years suddenly flooded my inbox, begging for detailed briefings on system architecture. Executive leadership scrambled to document operational workflows they had never bothered to understand, suddenly realizing that 16 years of institutional knowledge was walking out the front door. I completed every standard transition requirement with meticulous professionalism. I trained my designated replacement, a 26-year-old developer named Josh, who was bright but visibly overwhelmed by the vast complexity of our enterprise database structures. I ensured every line of standard company code was clean and cataloged, while maintaining complete control over my private intellectual property documentation. On a chilly Friday afternoon in March, I turned in my security badge, collected my personal belongings, and walked out of TechVault's glass headquarters for the last time. By 9 o'clock the following Monday morning, I was sitting in my new executive office at TechFlow Solutions in San Jose. My division consisted of 9 veteran engineers who possessed deep, practical knowledge of large-scale architecture. There were no juvenile ping-pong tables or gimmicky corporate slogans, just serious, experienced professionals focused on engineering resilient software. Within 6 weeks, we integrated my enhanced predictive threat detection framework into TechFlow's flagship security suite. The results exceeded our highest expectations. Automated threat detection times improved by 72 hours before attack vectors materialized. System processing efficiency increased by 35%, while false positive alerts plummeted by 60%. Our neural models achieved a 94% predictive accuracy rate across enterprise stress tests. 2 months after my arrival, Vanguard Financial officially announced they were terminating their multi-million-dollar security contract with TechVault and transitioning their entire enterprise infrastructure to TechFlow. In their public press release, Vanguard's chief information officer explicitly cited TechFlow's superior threat detection capabilities and architectural stability. Industry trade journals immediately published cover stories analyzing TechFlow's technical leap. Venture capital partners reached out to license our proprietary protocols. My phone began ringing continuously with interview requests from major technology publications. Then came the calls from Nicole Walsh. She called my mobile line 4 times in 2 days. I allowed every call to route directly to voicemail. On the 3rd day, she left a message that I preserved for legal records. "Dean, this is Nicole. We need to schedule an immediate consultation regarding our security infrastructure. TechVault is prepared to offer an extraordinary consulting retainer for your technical guidance. Please contact me immediately. We made an unfortunate miscalculation." The message sounded desperate, stripped of all former arrogance. I did not return the call. Late Thursday afternoon, as I walked toward my vehicle in TechFlow's secure parking structure, a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. It was Nicole. She looked exhausted, her hair unstyled dark circles beneath her eyes, completely devoid of the polished executive image she had projected in her corner office. "This is entirely improper, Nicole," I said, keeping a clear distance as I retrieved my vehicle keys. You have placed 180 jobs in severe jeopardy, she said, her voice strained and frantic. TechVault is facing an existential crisis because of the proprietary modules you removed from our system. I did not remove anything that belonged to TechVault, I replied coldly and clearly. I exercised my legal rights over my personal intellectual property. Technology engineered on my private hardware that TechVault utilized without proper acquisition contracts. Your legal team failed to perform basic due diligence because you viewed senior technical staff as obsolete assets unworthy of attention. Nicole stepped forward, her hand shaking. Name your price, Dean. Whatever TechFlow is paying, we will double it. We will appoint you Chief Technology Officer, grant immediate equity vesting, whatever terms you demand. I looked at her, remembering the morning she had scoffed at my 8% raise request and told me to pursue early retirement on local golf courses. I recalled how she had dismissed 16 years of dedication as an expensive line item. You once informed me that everyone is completely replaceable, I said softly. Even senior engineers with decades of experience. I am simply abiding by your business philosophy. Over the next quarter, TechVault's corporate trajectory descended into chaos. Without my personal predictive algorithms, their legacy security platform suffered repeated performance degradations and automated detection failures. Major enterprise clients followed Vanguard Financial in canceling their contracts. TechVault's stock plummeted 47% in less than 90 days. To stave off total collapse, TechVault's board initiated aggressive restructuring, issuing Warren Act layoff notices to 180 employees across multiple departments. Nicole Walsh was forced to resign under intense shareholder pressure after the company posted its worst fiscal quarter in history. The board replaced her with a 55-year-old veteran executive who immediately halted corporate vanity projects and tried desperately to stabilize operations. Then came the legal retaliation. TechVault filed a federal lawsuit against me and TechFlow Solutions, alleging theft of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate espionage. They sought millions of dollars in damages and an emergency injunction to halt TechFlow's deployment of the threat detection suite. The litigation ended in a decisive defeat for TechVault. In federal court, my legal counsel presented cryptographically signed commit logs, private workstation purchase receipts, and time-stamped personal repository records, proving beyond all doubt that the core algorithms were engineered on my private time prior to any deployment at TechVault. Furthermore, we produced internal emails showing I had repeatedly alerted management to the personal origin of the logic, alerts that executive leadership had ignored. The federal judge dismissed all of TechVault's claims with prejudice. Under statutory fee-shifting provisions for bad faith trade secret litigation, the court ordered TechVault to pay 100% of my legal defense costs, issuing a scathing, written opinion criticizing TechVault's executive management for egregious negligence in intellectual property administration. While the legal victory completely vindicated my actions, the broader consequences of TechVault's decline weighed heavily on my conscience. One afternoon, 3 months after the lawsuit concluded, Amanda Wilson, TechVault's former director of client relations, visited my office at TechFlow. Amanda had served at TechVault for 12 years before being swept up in the restructuring layoffs. 180 people lost their positions, Dean, Amanda said quietly, sitting in the armchair across from my desk. Good people with mortgages, families, and college tuition payments. Was your personal point worth dismantling their livelihoods? Her question landed with profound weight. In focusing on Nicole's arrogance, I had recognized that corporate missteps create wide collateral damage for innocent employees. You are entirely justified in asking that, Amanda, I answered truthfully. And that is precisely why TechFlow has actively recruited former TechVault staff. Over the preceding 4 months, TechFlow had systematically extended job offers to 73 former TechVault personnel who had been displaced by the restructuring, including Amanda's entire client support team, senior systems administrators, and quality assurance specialists. We provided them with competitive compensation, full health coverage, and a stable working environment. Furthermore, Amanda's visit spurred the formal creation of TechFlow's Experience Matters initiative. Spearheaded by my division, this corporate program explicitly targeted veteran professionals over 45 who had experienced workplace ageism across the technology sector. We established formal partnerships with 3 professional development organizations to provide advanced technical training for veteran engineers. We instituted flexible consulting structures for senior professionals approaching retirement age who wish to contribute their expertise without working 80-hour weeks. Crucially, TechFlow enacted strict corporate policies prohibiting age discrimination across all recruitment and promotion pipelines. The response from the engineering community was overwhelming. Within 12 months of launching the initiative, employment applications to TechFlow increased by 400%. Skilled veteran architects, senior database administrators, and experienced security researchers from across the nation applied to join a company that explicitly valued battle-tested experience over youthful corporate buzzwords. 18 months after departing TechVault, I stood on stage at an international technology summit to accept the IEEE Lifetime Achievement Award in Cloud Security Architecture. Looking out at the auditorium, filled with silver-haired veteran engineers and energetic young developers, collaborating side by side, I reflected on Nicole Walsh's arrogant suggestion that I pursue early retirement. She had been fundamentally mistaken about everything. Senior technical professionals are not expensive legacy burdens clinging to outdated methods. We are battle-tested experts who understand the vital distinction between moving hastily and engineering systems that endure over long horizons. When decades of deep technical experience combine with the determination to reject disrespect, extraordinary progress occurs. My personal life underwent a complete transformation as well. With my compensation at TechFlow, Laura received the finest medical care available, achieving full health recovery without our family incurring a single dollar of debt. Maya graduated from university debt-free and entered a master's program. Mason enrolled in his dream engineering university, fully funded by his father's hard-earned success. 6 months ago, TechVault made financial headlines one final time, incapable of recovering from client departures and reputational damage. The firm declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy and sold its remaining physical assets to a private equity liquidator. The organization I had spent 16 years building was completely erased, dismantled by executive leadership that confused corporate posture with technical substance and short-term cost-cutting with strategic wisdom. If you are currently over 45 years of age and navigating a workplace environment where management treats your years of dedicated experience as an expensive liability rather than a priceless asset, remember one fundamental truth. Your knowledge is not merely worth defending. It is worth fighting to protect. Document your innovations meticulously. Understand your statutory legal rights under labor and intellectual property law. Never allow arrogant management to convince you that your most productive years are behind you. Sometimes, the most transformative action an experienced professional can take is simply refusing to accept disrespect. Age in the technical industry is not a sign of weakness. It is battle-tested wisdom waiting to be unleashed, and when experience finally stands firm to demand its rightful value, entire industries take notice. My proprietary algorithms continue to run flawlessly. My name is permanently affixed to the patents. And somewhere in the corporate world, an executive is learning never to laugh at a senior engineer asking for what he has earned.